Hey guys, welcome back to Bible Fun with the Duns. Today we're studying 2 Kings chapter 1. Let's get started.
Okay, so in just a second, John is going to recap 2 Kings chapter 1 to us. Now, as we start a new book, this is a different brand of literature than we did in the previous book. So we've been reading the Proverbs. The Proverbs were short, concise little nuggets of wisdom that kind of help us to know how we evaluate life and how we look at life. What 2 Kings is going to do is it's going to take a more historical approach because it's going to show us the good, the bad, and the ugly of what happens when you have wisdom and what happens when you don't. Now, when you start this story, just understand that inside the book of Kings, you've got basically two guys initially that are going to be talked about, okay? So you've got two prophets. You've got one named Elijah, and then you've got another named Elisha. Now, you're going to meet Elisha in just a couple of days, but first, in chapter 1, you've got Elijah. Now, let me just kind of give you the rundown. Elijah is one of Israel's most famous prophets ever. He's the one where fire comes down on Mount Carmel and destroys all the bad guys. He's the one that lives out in the woods and he wears animal skins and he eats wild honey and bugs. He's a wild man. He's got a leather belt around his waist. And so you get kind of a look at him whenever you see John the Baptist in the New Testament. John the Baptist shows up in kind of the attitude and the behavior of Elijah. You'll find Elijah also in the New Testament. Whenever Jesus goes up on the mountain, Jesus is transfigured, and Moses and Elijah both appear to him. So he shows up there. Now, when I was growing up, I had trouble remembering who came first, Elijah or Elisha. Here's how I remembered it. So in the alphabet, the letter J comes before the letter S. Now, just follow me. So Elijah, E-L-I. By the way, that's the name for a shortened form of the name for God, for Elohim. Okay, so Elijah, and then his student who eventually takes his place is Elisha. And I just remember J comes before S, so Elijah comes before Elisha. That's how I remember it. Now, let's get into it. And what we're going to do is John's going to walk us through this story, and I'm going to just jump in and make comments as I see to.
All right, so in this chapter, the current king of Israel, he's kind of just chilling, but then he falls off of his balcony and gets injured. And he says to some messengers, hey, you need to go to this false god that we don't believe in, named Baal-zebub, I think, and see if I'm ever going to get healed. And so his messengers are like, okay. And so they are traveling, and then meanwhile, an angel appears to Elijah. Yeah.
There you go.
Appears to Elijah, and he says, hey, get up and go to the messengers and say that the king's not going to recover.
All right, so let me jump in right there. First thing, the king at the very beginning of the story, his name is Ahaziah. The first thing that happens in the story, like John says, is he's walking up on the balcony, and what does he do?
Fall.
Okay, so he has a great fall. Now, just kind of in a way of allegory, just understand this whole book is about the fall of the Jewish kingdom. So by the middle of the book, the northern kingdom of Israel, they're going to fall to the Assyrians. By the end of the book, the southern kingdom of Judah, they're going to fall to the Babylonians. This is the story of a great fall. This king has had a great fall, and he will not recover, and neither will the country. Now, the next thing is, so he sends his messengers off to, and he's sending them to a false god that called Beelzebub. And he calls him Beelzebub of Ekron. Now, here's what's interesting about that. The name Beelzebub in the Bible, it means Lord of the Flies. Yeah, so you'll probably read a book about that one day. But anyway, so it means Lord of the Flies. Well, basically, Ekron is a Philistine city. So remember Goliath, like David and Goliath? Goliath was on the Philistine side. Ekron was Philistine. So Beelzebub of Ekron, that was one of the gods of the Philistines. Now, David had defeated Goliath, So his God, they're saying, well, his God must have been nothing. And yet the king still runs to him. And then what's also interesting in this story is not only is the king running to him, but he's forgetting about the one true God. Now remember, as the story goes on, remember what's already happened in 1 Kings 18. Elijah went up on top of Mount Carmel with King Ahab. They had a contest where 450 prophets of Baal were on one side, like Beelzebub. Yeah, same thing. Okay, so he's fighting those guys. What fell from heaven? Fire. And what did it do to those guys?
Killed them.
It killed them. Well, this is Ahab's son. And so what in the world is going on where this guy has gone, you know what? My daddy's false gods really got us into trouble. I know what I'll do. I'll run to ask him a question. Here's the other side. When somebody faces their own mortality, now you may have never heard that before, but facing your own mortality means like you're facing the fact that you're going to die. You're not going to live forever. It's interesting that when somebody faces their own mortality, whatever they reach out to probably says a whole lot about them. So he thinks he's going to die and he's reaching out to false gods. That ain't a good sign. All right, what happened next?
Okay, so basically, Elijah, he goes to the messenger people and says that he's going to die. And so the messenger people go all the way back to the king and say, hey, we met this dude and he basically said you're going to die. And he's like, what? And he's like, I don't want to die. Who is this guy? And then they said something about a leather belt and some shaggy hair. And he says, oh, that must be Elijah of whatever place he lived at. And so he says to his people, he says, hey, you go and take 50 of your men and you're going to go to him and like ask him some stuff because the king doesn't want to die. And so basically they go to Elijah, who's just chilling on this little hill thing. And then the like dude in charge, he says, hey, come down here. It's king's orders. And then
they were trying to arrest him.
And they said, hey, come down here, holy man, king's orders. And then Elijah said, if I'm really that holy, then lightning strike or like fire strike you from the sky. And then boom, they're dead. And then basically the same thing happens again, and then they died too.
All right, let's pause right there. So 1 Kings chapter 18, Elijah is on top of Mount Carmel fighting like in the contest with the other worshipers of Baal. What falls from heaven?
Fire.
Okay, what's falling from heaven here?
Fire.
So this is like two more mini Mount Carmel situations. The fire of the Lord is falling. Also, they don't even know who Elijah is. Mm-hmm. And they have gotten so far removed, they don't remember a guy who just like a few years ago had fire fall from heaven and destroy all the bad guys. They forgot. How do you forget that guy? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so then the third guy comes. The third captain comes. What happens?
And instead of like demanding he comes down, he's like, please, he like takes on a pleading tone and he's more humble, I guess you'd say. And he says, please come down and stuff. And so the Lord kind of talks to Elijah and he says, don't be afraid, go down there. And so, yeah.
So there. Okay, so I want to draw one more conclusion. First two captains come with their armies. They want to arrest him. They say, hey, we're the boss. We're going to arrest you. And fire falls from heaven. And, Elijah likes that. And they wipe those guys off. The last guy comes humble. He says, hey, you're a man of God. He said, please, listen, we know who you are. Please be nice to us. And so they're bleeding like this. And Elijah gets this word from the Lord. Hey, go ahead and listen to this guy. So really all that happens is this guy comes humbly. And he comes without a whole lot of pride in his heart. And Elijah listens and goes with him. Now, if this whole story, the whole book is about the king who had the great fall, now the kingdoms who are headed for a great fall, if two of them fell and one of them was saved, the third general comes along and say, why? Because he was humble and he just asked, hey, please be good. Then the moral of the story is, at any point, the northern kingdom of Israel or the southern kingdom of Judah, they could have also approached God humbly and said, we've messed up. You are holy. Please don't hurt us. Please don't judge us. Would they have gone into exile?
No.
No. So chapter 1 is the story of the whole story. So as you're reading the whole book, just remember, chapter 1 is the story of the whole
Story.
Exactly. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.